So you've been told ISO is just about brightness, which okay, it sort of is. But what if I told you ISO doesn't actually add any light at all? It's actually a bit like turning up the volume on a bad recording. You don't get better music, you just get louder noise. And without understanding that, you could end up with noisy, muddy photos, or worse, blurry ones you can't fix. So in this video, I'm going to give you 5 simple exercises you can go out and try today. And by the end, you won't just understand ISO, you'll know when to use it and when to ignore the number completely. Oh, and as well as the 5 exercises, if you can stick around, there's a bonus tip at the end about how a lot of photographers shoot great pictures without giving ISO a thought. And before we jump in, let's make sense of this ISO stuff without making your head hurt. You've basically got 3 parts to exposure: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Now, shutter speed and aperture, they're doing the heavy lifting. They control how much light actually hits your sensor. ISO, well, it's just the cleanup crew, or the volume dial if you like. And did you know, just so this makes sense across all cameras, ISO actually comes from the International Standards Organization, which just means that ISO 100 on a Canon is the same baseline as an ISO 100 on a Sony or a Nikon or whatever camera you have. So when you learn this stuff once, it translates to any camera you pick up. Good to know, eh? So a low ISO equals a quiet signal, and a high ISO is a loud signal. But here's the thing most people miss. If there's not much light to begin with, you're basically turning up a weak signal, and that's where the noise comes from. Not because your camera's broken or not capable, but because it didn't have much to work with in the first place. And by the way, modern cameras are really good at handling high ISO, far better than my Canon 5DSR, and to be fair, this is pretty good anyway. So if you're still clinging to ISO 100 like it's some kind of photography rule, some kind of mantra, it's not. It's just a habit. And if you're watching this thinking, I get it, but I don't fully get it, this could well be of interest to you. If you'd like a safe space to continue your photography journey with like-minded people, then why not come and join us in our Photography Foundations community over on School. It's a really safe and friendly place to be. No ads, no algorithms, and no traditional social media nonsense. Just photographers from all around the world who are learning, practicing, sharing, and supporting each other. We have an active forum where members post their images, ask questions, and share ideas. There's a classroom with structured learning and feedback sessions, a members map so you can see who's near you, and regular challenges and discussions to keep your photography moving forward. So if that sounds like your sort of thing, the link is in the description, or you can use the QR code on the screen, and we'd love to see you there. Also, before we get going, if you haven't seen the other 2 in this little series yet, I've already done one on aperture and one on shutter speed. They all work together, so it's worth watching those as well. I'll link them in the description for you. Okay, let's crack on. For this, put your camera in aperture priority and find a simple static subject, a mug, a plant, or maybe something on a table near a window. If you've got a tripod, it's best to use it, because as you drop your ISO, your camera may slow the shutter speed down to compensate, and if you're handheld, you'll introduce shake, and you might think ISO is the problem, when actually it was you. No offense. Then frame your shot, and don't move, which, thinking about it, is another good reason to be on a tripod. Anyway, take 3 photos. One at ISO 100, another at ISO 800, and a third at ISO 3200. In aperture priority, we're letting the camera handle the shutter speed. And what you'll see is that the exposure looks similar, but as ISO goes up, you'll see more grain, especially in the shadows. This happens because you're turning up the signal and everything else that comes with it. It's a bit like when a musician makes a recording that's too quiet. If they turn up the volume or gain to get it loud enough, then the background noise is also turned up, all that hissing and buzzing. I hope that makes sense. So the takeaway here is that ISO is not changing your photo, it's changing how hard your camera works to show it. And a bit of noise is actually completely normal, and honestly, most people won't even notice it. For this one, use the same setup as the first exercise, but this time switch to manual mode. And if you're not used to shooting in manual mode, I quickly covered that in the video on aperture if you need to check it out. So for the first shot, underexpose slightly, maybe by a stop or two. For shot 2, raise the ISO to expose properly using the light meter as a guide. In your editing software, when you brighten the first image, it starts to fall apart because noise lives in the shadows. The second one, you should see that one holds together much better. This is because your sensor didn't get enough light in the first shot. You basically starved it for the purpose of the exercise. So this shows us that low ISO does not always equal high quality. Good exposure does. Basically, we should stop chasing numbers and start chasing light instead. Another reminder that photography is actually all about light. So for this one, you'll need to find something with movement. Maybe people walking, cars going by, or get someone to wave their hand like they've had too much coffee. I'm sure you get the idea. For the first shot, with your camera still in manual mode, set the lowest ISO available. Use a slower shutter speed, say 1/30th of a second, and take the shot. For shot 2, choose a faster shutter speed, maybe 1/500th of a second. Keep the aperture the same as the first shot, and raise the ISO to get a balanced exposure. And what you should see is that one looks clean, but soft and blurry, and the other has a bit of noise, but it's sharp. This is important to understand because sharpness is a structure, noise is only a bit of texture. And anyway, would you prefer a blurry soft image with noise or a sharp one with some noise? And here's the thing, you can fix noise. In fact, modern software is getting better and better at it. But you can't really fix blur. Well, not that easily anyway. So if you're ever stuck, raise the ISO and get the shot. Okay, so this one is all about testing your own camera, or cameras if you have more than one. Find a scene with low light, whether that's indoors, evening, nighttime, or shade maybe. Then with your camera still in manual mode, so you get extra practice altering shutter and aperture to get a balanced exposure, take the same shot at ISO 800, 1600, 3200, and 6400. What you'll see is at some point you think, okay, that's a bit much now. That's a bit more noise than I'd like. This is useful because it helps you find your personal limit regarding what you find acceptable. Not your camera's limit necessarily, but yours. The takeaway here is that confidence comes from testing, from trial and error, not guessing and not from pot luck. You only need to do this once and you stop panicking about ISO from here on in. So for a real world test, stick with manual mode. Set your shutter speed based on your subject and set your aperture based on your creative choice. Then use ISO to balance the exposure. For example, say you wanted a nice blurry background for a portrait. Creatively, you'd pick a wide aperture such as f2.8. The subject isn't moving, so 1/25th of a second or above should be fine if you're handheld. Then use the ISO to get a balanced exposure. Or let's say you're shooting a landscape. You'll want as much of the scene in focus as possible. So your creative choice here would be f11 or f16 maybe. If you're handheld, I'd suggest a shutter speed minimum of 1/60th of a second to avoid blur from camera shake. So from this, hopefully you'll see that ISO becomes the helper, your assistant, and not the decision maker. This is how photography starts to feel easier. You decide what you want, then use the camera to get there, not the other way around. Does that make sense? And by the way, I'd really love to know which one of these exercises you're going to try first. Or, if you've already had a go, what did you notice? Drop it in the comments. I read and respond to every single one. So let's quickly recap what we've done here today. You've seen what ISO actually does. You've seen why exposure matters more. You've protected sharpness. And you've learned about your own camera. That's a massive step forward. Okay, as you're still here, how about that bonus I promised? So give this a go. Manual mode with auto ISO. You set the shutter speed, you set the aperture, and let the camera handle the ISO. So now, you're in control of motion, you're in control of depth, and the camera handles exposure changes. This way, the camera is definitely more like an assistant. So if you walk from sun into shade, you don't have to think about it. It sorts it out for you. And this is brilliant because it gives you one less thing to think about. It frees you up to think creatively. You stop messing with settings so much and start seeing. And that's where the good stuff happens. So to wrap this up then, ISO gets a bad reputation, but it really shouldn't. It's just a tool. And like any tool, it's only a problem if you don't understand it. But now you do. So get out there, try these exercises, push your camera a bit, push yourself a bit, and see what happens. Because this is where it all starts to fall into place. Where you stop playing safe and start making photos, not just taking them. So don't forget to check out our Photography Foundations community over on School. And if this helped, give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really is appreciated. As always, thanks so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you in the next one.